There won't be a flash, no mushroom cloud, no headline screaming, "It's begun." The next world war won't start with an explosion. It will begin in silence. In boardrooms, data centers, and satellite uplinks, invisible currents are already shifting. Trade routes bend like magnetic lines under unseen pressure. Militaries reconfigure their doctrines. Alliances harden into blocks that no longer negotiate. They prepare. Every empire thinks it can sense the approach of its own storm, but this time, the thunder is digital, financial, logistical. And by the time the first shot is fired, the battlefield will already exist, not as a place, but as a condition, a system slowed, fragmented, and redefined. They call it multi-theater deterrence, a phrase that sounds sterile until you realize it means the United States is quietly preparing to face three nuclear-capable adversaries at once: Russia, China, and Iran. Never in recorded history has a single power attempted such a balancing act. And behind the calm briefings and official optimism lies a truth that even the Pentagon doesn't deny. The margin for error has vanished. The machine that sustains the global order isn't breaking in one place. It's eroding everywhere at once. Currency confidence, supply chains, cyber grids, energy dependencies. Every invisible thread that kept civilization synchronized is now fraying under the weight of rivalry, drought, and distrust. If you listen carefully, you can already hear the hum of preemption, the sound of nations positioning, not yet striking. This is not a documentary about panic. It's about pattern recognition, the discipline of seeing how silence rearranges the world before the noise begins. If you're watching this, it's because you sense it too. You've seen the headlines grow shorter, the explanations vaguer, the stakes higher. Stay with us. This is the survival brief, because the line between awareness and survival has never been thinner. The new map. The old Cold War had walls. You could draw it, map it, predict it. This one has layers, shifting like sand. Look east. A surgical strike in the Middle East doesn't just neutralize a target, it rewrites red lines. Look north, in Europe. A war once defined by front lines is now defined by tempo, by who adapts faster to fatigue. Look west, in the Pacific. Every satellite that moves an inch triggers a counter-orbit. And between them all runs the same pulse: quiet escalation. June 13th. An Israeli strike so precise it bordered on cinematic fiction, designed not for optics, but decapitation. A single attempt to remove the mind of Iran's military apparatus. The world barely blinked. News cycles moved on within days. But under that silence, pressure shifted. Hardliners furious, legitimacy fracturing, retaliation debated in whispers. That's how it starts, not with rage, but with calculation. Each side trying to guess how far it can push without making the first irreversible move. The fuse is lit. No one knows how long it is. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, a different kind of stalemate is taking shape, one that's more dangerous precisely because it's normalized. The war in Ukraine no longer dominates headlines, but the battlefield hasn't gone quiet, it's gone efficient. Ukraine now manufactures 200,000 combat drones a month. Cheap, agile, swarm-ready. War at scale made affordable. Russia answers with brute endurance, artillery, trench warfare, the kind of industrial persistence that breaks morale before it breaks metal. Sanctions didn't crush Moscow, they refined it. What was supposed to suffocate has instead forced adaptation. Factories once building cars now forge missiles. The West misread exhaustion as defeat. And in the shadow of all that, NATO rehearses. 40,000 troops deployed in under 72 hours across Europe. Not because an invasion is imminent, but because readiness is deterrence. When exercises become indistinguishable from mobilization, the line between peace and preparation blurs to nothing. You can't see the difference until it's gone. The porcupine and the dragon. Half a world away, Taiwan fortifies itself like a blade turned outward. Anti-ship batteries on the coast, autonomous drones on the airfields, underground bunkers stacked with fuel, ammo, data. Washington calls it the porcupine doctrine. Every spike is meant to draw blood if touched. But Beijing doesn't plan to touch, not in the way the West imagines. For centuries, Chinese strategy has favored paralysis over confrontation. Win by freezing your opponent's mind, not by meeting their weapons. While America prepares for invasion, China prepares for interruption. Sleeper cyber units are believed to be buried deep inside global infrastructure. Not hackers in hoodies, but code hidden in logistics systems, power grids, telecom backbones. A new kind of troop, invisible, instant, deniable. Their mission isn't destruction, it's confusion. One false command to a port, one glitch in an air traffic node, one delay in a global payment system, and chaos blooms without a single bullet fired. The first strike might not look like war at all. It might look like silence. That silence, the blackout, the signal loss, the financial freeze, is the modern equivalent of the first cannon shot. And when it happens, every screen, every system, every assumption about stability will turn into a question mark. That's the reality the generals prepare for and the civilians ignore. But in a networked world, ignorance is impact. Because when the grid flickers, it doesn't care who's innocent. When supply chains choke, they don't ask who started it. The system fails symmetrically, and the first victims are always the most dependent. The multi-front reality. While headlines chase Gaza or Kyiv or Taipei, the Pentagon sees a single diagram: simultaneous containment. 3 theaters, 3 doctrines, one overstretched empire trying to remain everywhere at once. Space Command is now fully operational. AI integration has entered live deployment. Orbital readiness, real-time cyber deterrence, and for the first time in U.S. history, domestic agencies are training for national mobilization readiness. Border security units now drill with military counterparts under interoperability protocols. That's not politics, that's posture. A country bracing not just for external chaos, but for the possibility that instability could start within. Germany wants its own nuclear umbrella. Poland is building Europe's largest land army. Japan has doubled defense spending. Australia is integrating its missile targeting directly with U.S. systems. What used to be deterrence through alliance is now deterrence through duplication. Every ally arming independently, not because they distrust the U.S., but because they can't afford to need it. The post-Cold War disarmament era is over. We've entered the age of open rearmament. The only difference? No one's calling it that. If you've made it this far, you already think in systems, not stories. That's the mindset that separates awareness from reaction. Stay with the survival brief. We break the patterns before they break you. The era of fatigue. The world isn't sleepwalking into war, it's scrolling into one. Crisis has become content. Conflict has become background noise. Each new escalation lasts 24 hours before the algorithm buries it beneath the next headline. It's not apathy, it's overload. When every headline is urgent, urgency loses meaning. That's how normalization happens. You don't agree to danger, you get used to it. And while you adapt to chaos, chaos adapts to you. Governments are counting on that fatigue. They can escalate quietly because nobody's really watching anymore. Exercises become operations. Sanctions become sieges. Posturing becomes policy. And the moment you realize it, the next war won't be next. It'll already be running in background mode.
the silent front lines. Wars used to have borders. Now they have bandwidth. In the quiet war, the front lines are invisible. Glowing cables, shipping manifests, spreadsheets, signals bouncing between satellites that no one looks up to see. This is not a world of soldiers marching across fields. It's a world of systems grinding against each other in the dark. Energy, information, credit. You feel it long before you recognize it. A supply delay that lasts a little longer than usual. A fuel price spike explained by market adjustments. An outage that the news calls routine maintenance. A rumor that doesn't quite go away. These are not accidents. They're the tremors of a planet reconfiguring its loyalties. The battlefield has expanded into everything that runs on a schedule. If it moves, it can be blocked. If it connects, it can be corrupted. If it depends on another system, it can be delayed. And if it depends on trust, it can be dismantled with a whisper. The next world war will not begin with a tank crossing a border. It will begin with a failure to deliver. Look at logistics. The arteries of civilization, ports, railways, air freight, are now the most valuable terrain on Earth. A single ransomware attack on a shipping hub can delay half a continent's food imports. One corrupted update can paralyze customs for weeks. That's not a hypothetical. It's already happened. Maersk in 2017. Colonial Pipeline in 2021. The blueprints for future disruption are written in past headlines nobody bothered to remember. Now look at finance. The same systems that make trade frictionless can also make trust optional. Sanctions, digital freezes, and algorithmic compliance are the new artillery. When the dollar becomes a weapon, the system itself becomes the battlefield. And every country watching learns the same lesson. If you can be cut off, you will be. If you can be monitored, you already are. That's why parallel economies are quietly forming. Parallel payment rails, oil sold in yuan, BRICS credit systems, blockchain-based clearance. The dream of globalization, one network, one market, has turned into a patchwork of fortresses. Even communication has become a theater of war. Information warfare isn't about propaganda anymore. It's about pace. The side that controls the rhythm of truth controls perception. You don't have to lie if you can bury facts under an avalanche of irrelevance. In the last decade, every major conflict began not with troops, but with narratives, seeded, boosted, then withdrawn once confusion took hold. And confusion is the modern fog of war. You can't plan your response when you can't tell what's real. That's why the first casualties of any future war will be clarity and time. The civilian battle space. If you want to know what a global conflict feels like in the 2020s, stop imagining explosions, imagine disruptions. Empty shelves, stalled deliveries, financial freezes, digital outages, and the slow realization that temporary means indefinite. In this new battle space, the distinction between combatant and civilian dissolves. Your grocery list, your thermostat, your online banking, your newsfeed, all are nodes in the same system. If the system goes dark, your life pauses. If it stays dark, your life shrinks. Preparedness isn't about fear. It's about agency, about refusing to let your well-being depend entirely on systems you don't control. Governments call it resilience. Preppers call it readiness. But what it really is independence rediscovered. A quiet war doesn't demand soldiers. It demands stable minds. Because panic spreads faster than any virus, and in an age of networked instability, emotional discipline is national defense. That's why the most powerful posture you can adopt isn't political, it's personal sovereignty. You can't decide what Moscow does. You can't influence what Beijing or Washington signs next week, but you can build the habits that make you shockproof. A buffer of food and water, a cash reserve, a plan for communication when the signal dies, and a network of people who can share labor, information, and calm. This isn't survivalism. It's 21st century citizenship. In an age where governments plan for disruption, you must too.
The psychology of readiness. Fear sells. That's why every cycle of panic burns out so fast. It's a product, not a plan. But real readiness isn't emotional, it's methodical. It's the slow, unglamorous work of noticing what you depend on most and asking, what happens if it stops? A nation's strength is built from millions of individual routines that keep working even when the center doesn't. That's how societies endure. That's how wars fail to conquer. The quiet war won't be won with missiles. It'll be won with continuity, by the households and communities that stay functional while everyone else freezes in shock. So write this down. Resilience is the new deterrence. If you can't be easily broken, you're less likely to be attacked. If you can't be easily panicked, you're harder to control. And if you can stay calm in the fog, you can help others find their way through it. The new doctrine: adapt or depend. Every government is rewriting its doctrine right now. Energy independence, domestic manufacturing, secure supply lines. But the doctrine you write for your own household will matter just as much. It starts with a mindset shift from consumer to operator. You're not a passenger in the system, you're a node. You can reduce your exposure, you can extend your autonomy, and you can design routines that keep you functional when the grid coughs. When the next temporary disruption hits, most people will wait for instructions. Don't. Act like the system will fix itself, but prepare as if it won't. Your first 72 hours define your stability. Your first 14 days define your resilience. Your first 90 days define your sovereignty. That's the math of the modern world. The myth of distant. The most dangerous illusion of our time is that conflict is always elsewhere. We think in maps, not in supply chains. We think in borders, not in bandwidth. But in 2025, distance is dead. A factory fire in Vietnam means no medicine in Vancouver. A shipping strike in Hamburg means no fuel in Chicago. A data breach in Taiwan means no payroll in Toronto. Globalization has turned geography into a latency, a delay, not a barrier. So when the next crisis erupts, it won't matter where it starts. It will reach you before you can Google it. And if you're still waiting for confirmation, you're already behind. The clock is moving. There's a quiet countdown happening, not toward apocalypse, but toward inevitability. Empires rise. Empires stretch. Empires correct. But this time, the correction will be planetary. Trade, technology, energy, population, trust. Every variable that made the last century possible is now under stress. The old world isn't dying in a bang, it's fading in bandwidth. You don't need to predict the exact day the noise begins. You just need to recognize that silence is the sound of alignment. And right now, that silence is deafening. This is the world's quiet war, fought in the shadows of systems, waged with code, currency, and confusion. You can't stop it, but you can outlast it. So write your own doctrine, build your buffer, strengthen your circle. Because when the headlines finally admit what your instincts already know, the prepared won't panic, they'll proceed. I'm not asking you to be afraid. I'm asking you to stay awake. Drop your first 3 steps for resilience in the comments. Then subscribe to the Survival Brief, your weekly signal through the fog. Because awareness isn't fear, and preparation isn't paranoia. It's the last quiet freedom in a world that's getting loud.